teachers on whose works we are benefiting from. So the knowledge sources we know traditionally, the Shruti, that which is heard, Vedas, Samhitas, Brahmanas, Aranyakas, Upanishads, these formed a huge corpus of works in ancient India, as well as the Smriti, that which is remembered, the six Vedangas, grammar, meter, astronomy, rituals, itihasas, text, dharma, artha, kama, moksha, Puranas, Kavyas, Bhashyas, Sutras, Shastras, Nibandhas, politics, medicine, culture, arts, Jain, Buddhist works, which also can fit in these frameworks, artisan knowledge systems. So the bottom line is, in India, there existed a very, very strong corpus of knowledge systems as well as means for knowledge and the ability for an ordinary person to find intellectual expression in whatever they wanted to accomplish over here. In terms of epistemology, we can see that the several schools of thought evolved in India. We can see Nyaya, for example, that said all knowledge is not intrinsically valid. Most knowledge is not valid unless proven. Truth exists whether we human beings know it or not. Rishi Akshapada Gautama is one of the famous exponents of Nyaya. Yoga, Patanjali, we know he has codified the yogas and the Yoga Sutras, and you have the yamas, niyama, asana, pranayama, and others. Vaisheshika by Rishi Kanada, which works on perception and inference. Samkhya by Rishi Kapila, systematic enumeration, rational examination. Purva Mimamsa Kumarila Bhatta on reflection, consideration, profound thought, investigation, examination, discussion. And Vedanta, up to 10 schools exist. I just put Adi Shankara with Advaita over here, as well as Jain and Buddhist works, which also fit into these frameworks. By putting this, what I wanted to show is there is a very well understood mechanism of admitting knowledge. And that leads to the next slide, which is basically the means of knowledge, pramana. So in ancient India, there evolved different sampradayas, different schools that admitted different ways of admitting knowledge. Today, for example, if one of you is doing your PhD, let's say in electrical engineering, you go to the library, take an IEEE journal. In that journal, you see some expert, a professor from MIT or Caltech or somewhere has published a paper and a theorem, and you say on the basis of that theorem, I approved these additional theorems, and you write your thesis. So clearly, there is a mechanism on which you're appealing to authority of knowledge and building your knowledge systems based on that. In ancient India, the Charvakas, for example, said only perception. If I can perceive it, it is true, and that is when I can admit that as knowledge. They rejected everything else. Buddhists said perception and inference alone are necessary for knowledge, and nothing else is valid. And by that way, you can take a look at Samkhya, Nyaya, Vaisheshika, Mimamsa, Dvaita, Jainism, Dvaita, and what are the different ways they saw knowledge systems as. And by the time you come to Advaita, it is admitting knowledge from almost anything, from perception, inference, comparison, analogy, postulation, derivation of circumstances, negative proof, non-perception, as well as Shabda Pramana, relying on the word of experts. All these things were admitted, and one had to debate these things using perception, inference, and analogy, and other such things, and eventually say this is a true statement or a false statement. So what we see is ancient India evolved an epistemology which is deeply scientific, far more than perhaps what we are talking about today. We had knowledge systems of that nature. And I always say, if we want to study the world knowledge systems, it is important to see in the Indian civilization, what was the goal of life? The goal of life was always to seek knowledge. The one line description of a Hindu in those days was to dispel the avidya. What is that avidya? That avidya about your true existence, that you are Brahman, so you're part of Brahman. To understand that, you had to dispel this avidya about your attachment to the world of objects, emotions, thoughts, and so on, and gain vidya. And that gaining of vidya was by any of these mechanisms shown over here, depending on the sampradaya in which you might have belonged to. So this was a path in which Hindus were asked to be in, which is more or less thou shalt seek. And in the world systems, we see mostly Abrahamic thought, which follows a divine dictated law. That is the goal of life over here. And thou shalt obey. We see that science flourished in India because of the philosophies that we had. As long as ancient Greece had contact with India, they too had science. However, ancient Greece was conquered by Rome in 145 BCE, And Rome itself underwent Christianity in around 325 current era, after which Europe fell into dark ages till the age of rationalism in the 17th, 18th century. It is important to understand how philosophy and science are deeply intertwined, why one system allows growth of knowledge and another system might not allow the growth of knowledge. Very